All right, hello everyone, welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday lunch hour afternoon. I hope everyone's weeks are going well, as well as they can, that we're all getting that self-care in and pushing through the best we are able to. My name is Amanda Martinez, and I am the Training Program Manager for Mental Health America of Hawaii. And this is our virtual brown bag mental wellness tips and strategies for surviving and thriving. Right, so the format for this webinar today, it is a webinar format, so all of your cameras and microphones are automatically turned off, so don't worry about accidentally turning anything on. It should not happen. I do encourage some interaction, right? So we'll be going through the material. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A feature on your screens. Go ahead and drop any questions that you may have into there. You also have a chat box feature, so if you want to interact a little bit with each other, you can drop some questions for me in the chat box. It's a little harder for me to keep track of, but I will dedicate some time at the end to be able to address any of those that may come up. In the chat box, if you send a message to all panelists, then only myself will be able to see that. However, if you send a message to all panelists and attendees, then everyone else who is also on this webinar with us will be able to see that too. Okay. This webinar is being recorded, so after the conclusion of today, we will send out a follow-up email with that link to the recording, as well as a copy for the presentation slides and any other resources that we may be talking about. One of the most, important topics that is going to be expanded upon today and is really the focus is really self-care, why that's important and how do we do that? What does that look like? So you'll also notice as we go through the slides that a lot of the images in this presentation have that tag @LiveNow, because they're actually posts taken from our Instagram page that provides even more self-care tips and strategies. So if you're on Instagram, I highly encourage you to follow us. There's a lot of really great information on there. And before we jump into the material, I wanted to start off by pointing out this quote by Robert Frost, right? The best way out is always through. And I think this is especially relevant today, as we are navigating through everything that is happening in the world today together. We can't always avoid what's in front of us or turn a blind eye to what is happening, but we can focus on what we do have control over and work through that together. Okay, so for today, we will be continuing or jumping right into our exploration of self-care, why that's important, how we can use self-care to build our emotional strength, right? To build ourselves up emotionally, not only for ourselves, but our keiki and for our adolescents as well. So these are some of the topics that we will be covering. We're gonna dispel some self-care myths and go over tips. We're gonna touch upon the role that grief plays in all of our lives, different mental health strategies, the role that pre-existing mental health challenges plays in today's world, as well as cover some different resources for community members, which is all of us, right? So let's start with some myths about self-care, because I know we've all seen and or heard of these circling around. We may even have said some of these, right? So the first one is, I need to be productive, okay? We're at home, working remotely, or maybe we're not working right now, we're learning remotely, right? So we feel like, in theory, we've got a lot of time on our hands, right? That we are able to turn to hobbies, right? Or get a big project done. And if you can, absolutely, you should be able to do that, but that's not a requirement, right? Productivity can be reframed to include self-care time and relaxing. Right? So if you haven't learned a new language during this time, that's okay. If you haven't tackled that big home improvement project, that's okay as well. The point is, this is not a vacation, right? It's a difficult and stressful time where taking care of ourselves and our loved ones is the priority. And being productive in a time of uncertainty where we may be feeling, anxious, scared, or worried, or uncertain is really hard to do. So we are continuously trying to adapt to that ever-changing reality and really defining what productivity is. I woke up on time today. I washed my hair. I did some laundry. The kids learned something new today. Those are all wins, right? So working self-care into your day is a sign of productivity, right? We don't have to make these huge accomplishments. The second bullet point on there is I shouldn't feel blank, right? Grief, sadness, anger, confusion, whatever that may be. It's normal to have mixed emotions. Right? So I just caution you to beware not to invalidate you or even other people's emotions through cross comparison, right? By comparing our emotions to other people's emotions, because we're all our own individuals, right? And we all have our own little mix of emotions that's going on. So, saying things like, I shouldn't feel angry or sad because it's not that big of a deal. Or maybe some people have it way worse than me, so I can't feel bad about something that's happening to me, right? Your experiences are your experiences, right? And they are valid. Again, it's normal to feel that mix of emotions, and even for our moods to fluctuate throughout the day, throughout the week, and throughout our lifetimes. We can't control the emotions that we may be feeling, but what we do have some control over is our behaviors as a result of dealing with those emotions, right? So let's try our best to choose positive and healthy ways to be able to handle and cope with our emotions. Right? The third point on there is I don't need self-care. Okay? Everyone needs self-care. So try, looking at self-care. If you are one of those people who feel like you don't need it, you're in an okay place, try instead looking at self-care as like a bank, right? That you are investing in. So you may not need it right now, but you can withdraw from it when you need to, right? So by investing in self-care, by taking some time every single day and working self-care into our routines, we are investing into our emotional bank accounts, right? So in the future, if we need to pull from that bank account for ourselves, or if someone else needs us to pull from that to be there for them, we'll have that there, right? It's about investing. You cannot pour into yourself when you yourself are empty. So it's really important that we are prioritizing and investing in our self-care, even when we feel like we don't necessarily need it in the moment. The fourth point on there is I will only feel this way once, right? I think a lot of us are aware that emotions can be circular, right? They fluctuate, they go, in and out, they leave, they come back. You can feel lost or overwhelmed at different times, and that's a normal response to an abnormal situation that we are in. Right? So with so much happening and things constantly changing, and the uncertainty of what's going to be happening next, or even what we are supposed to be doing, not only with the pandemic, but with other things that are happening, with the social unrest of our country, with the political divide that we see, with tragic events that are happening around the world. Like, it's all going back to validating those emotions. We may feel upset at one moment, we may feel okay later on, and then go back to feeling upset or stressed out or anxious. And that's normal, right? We as human beings, that's a normal reaction. And then the last point on there is we shouldn't tell the kids anything, right? It's important actually to tell our kids and our children what is happening. We just got to make sure we're doing it in a developmentally appropriate way. And we will be talking about this a little more detail later on in the presentation. But if you have children, or if you work with children, you probably already know that they are very observant, right, of their environment, of the people in their lives, of adult behaviors, like body language, changes in our voice, how we react to different situations. So we want to make sure that we are providing a safe and developmentally appropriate information, but also modeling that kind of positive coping behavior for our kids as well. But again, we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a couple slides. All right. So let's touch upon grief a little bit. Okay, what grief really is loss, and we are experiencing that loss here in the state, within our households, across the communities, across the country, with the disruption of everything that's happening, right, with our lives, with our routines before the pandemic, what our plans or expectations were going to be for 2020. Missing milestones, right? Not too long ago was graduation season. So even for our youth, right, missing big milestones in that sense. People celebrating birthdays at home, not having parties or being able to gather like they used to be able to. So again, it's important to not cross compare with others, right? Again, you can gain some context right, for your situation, but just be careful not to invalidate how you feel because you feel that other people might have it worse, right? And this is especially important when it comes to grief, right? Pain is pain, and we all need support around it. It may look a little differently from the person next to us or from one of our friends or family members, but we all need support. If someone has a history of trauma as well, they may be experiencing this new challenge or any new challenge of grief more intensely, right? And it may bring up similar feelings from their past as well. And this may be confusing, right? As the situations may be different, they're not exactly the same. So why are they bringing up the same types of feelings? But research has shown that the similarity is in the feelings and the pain that they may be experiencing and how those are linked and connected with each other. So, if you feel that this is a concern for you, or if it's a concern for someone that you love or care about, please reach out for support and help. And there's a lot of help that's out there. There's lots of resources and organizations that are doing great things and people who care. And we'll be able to provide some of those resources for you at the end of this presentation. Right? We all cope differently. And just like we all cope differently, we all grieve differently. Right? But we can take some comfort, at least, in that we are all going through this process together. Right? Let's build that sense of community and camaraderie, and let's honor the process for ourselves as well as for our loved ones. All right, so my background is in public health. So we often turn in public health to different theories and to different models to help explain human behavior, or to at least provide some structure to developing a response to a problem in our community. Now, since we're not here with this presentation to become public health experts or even mental health professionals, the good news is you don't have to dive too deep into this theory and its history unless it's something you're really interested in. Rather, I want us to think of this model by Kübler-Ross as being a loose framework just to begin that conversation on what grief may look like during a pandemic. Okay? So let's start by exploring some of these different stages. First, we have denial. Not here, not me, shock. Okay, so denying the reality of the situation. It's not me. I don't know anyone who has it. It's not in my immediate vicinity. Therefore, it's not real to me, right? Can be part shock, but it can also be sometimes what I refer to as being like an ostrich, right? We're putting our heads in the ground. If it can't see us, then I can't see it. There's also anger or anxiety, right? Surrounding feelings of loss of control, right? Or a sense of helplessness. So feeling not in control of a situation can lead to feelings of anger or anxiety, among others, like irritability. We can't control everything, right? And so it's super important that we focus on and really try to put our energy towards the things that we can control, like our own behaviors, right? And we'll also be talking about that a little bit more in depth in a couple of slides too. Then we have bargaining, looking for or sharing stories of extreme situations or events on social media. Have the intention, right? Usually of informing others. We want to share their people's stories or spread, different news articles and things of that nature. But it's also meant to be kind of a shock factor, right? It's meant to get a reaction out of other people. And this may not be the most helpful or useful when we are already feeling stressed and we may already be feeling anxious, right? So let's just be aware of what it is that we are seeing and choosing to share and spread on social media too. We have depression, increases in feelings of sadness or grief. So again, it's normal to be feeling an increase in sadness or grief. However, if it starts to impact your life in a significant way, and by that I mean if it starts to impact your ability to carry out daily activities, so just be able to do things to get through your day, if it starts to impact your relationships, right? So those connections that you have with your family, friends, with your loved ones, those people close to you in your social circles, or if it starts to impact your ability to work or to learn. Okay, once it starts to impact those three areas, then that might be a good time to think about reaching out for support. And again, there's a lot of support that's out there. And then we have acceptance, right? Talking about radical acceptance and kind of settling into this new reality, right? That seems to be constantly changing. So we're always feeling like we're constantly having to adjust. We're going to talk more about what radical acceptance is, but it's just good to take note that these stages are not linear, right? That people may move in and out of them at different times, but at least it provides us with a loose framework of what grief kind of looks like and the different roles that it plays. All right, so we've talked a bit about the importance of validating our emotions and choosing healthy and positive ways to work through them, right? So let's take a look at some of these other self-care tips. We as human beings are social animals. Right? Yes, we should be physically distancing, but certainly not socially distancing in that sense, right? We shouldn't be cutting ourselves off from the people that we have connections with. We actually should be reaching out to, checking in with, and connecting with our friends and with our loved ones. And also note with that is it's okay to have some alone time. If you're more of an introvert and you don't mind spending time alone, that's okay too. Every person is different. Everyone's personality characteristics are different as well. Just be careful that it doesn't become a pattern that leads to feelings of isolation or loneliness. And don't overcheck. We, of course, want to stay informed and up to date with what's happening in the world, but it may not be helpful to check the news constantly throughout our days, right? Multiple times a day, especially when there's so many different kinds of information out there, and even sometimes information that's conflicting with each other. Okay? And so consider, setting some time, maybe once or twice a day, to get that information instead of continuously checking it throughout, right? Focus on the helpers, right? I think one of the more positive things to come out of everything that has been going on is an increased sense of community and really highlighting the importance of coming together and helping those in need if we can, right? What are those things that we can do to help our neighbors, to help our friends, to help maybe family members, or even to help the larger community? By focusing on bolstering our sense of community, by building up that sense of community, we are also fostering a sense of hope for the future, right? That we are all in this together and we're working towards getting some kind of normalcy back into our lives and into our routines, right? Check in on essential workers and the vulnerable people in your circles. Checking in doesn't have to be huge grand gestures, right, or huge time commitments. It could be as simple as a phone call or a text saying, hey, I was thinking about you today. How are you doing? Right? Or thank you so much for all that you're doing. Do you need anything? Right? Can I help in any way? And follow a schedule. Again, another part of being a human being is that we crave routine and consistency. So keeping a routine, for example, going to bed and waking up around the same time every day while being at home or working remotely will help in transitioning into some semblance of a new normal, when we get to that point again. But it's important that we try our best to stick to our routines and provide that structure for our day-to-day. Okay, so moving on, schedule in self-care, right? Even if it's only 5 minutes out of your day, taking 5 minutes out of your day and prioritizing that for self-care, doing that consistently and working it into your routines really does make a difference. And use social media responsibly. We will be talking more about social media in the next couple of slides, but it's important that we are choosing to use social media responsibly, right? Sharing online resources, identifying what those online resources may be and spreading them, even if you won't be using them, could be beneficial to someone else, right? Someone may see something that you shared and be like, wow, I didn't even know that existed. That's really cool. And I could really use that in my life, right? And of course, invest in yourself. We've already touched upon this, right? Self-care is not selfish. We should be paying more attention to our self-care routines, or even just establishing one in the first place, right? Remembering that investing in yourself and in your self-care like we would with our banks, right? So we can pull from it when we need it. And then use coping skills. There's a lot of different kinds of coping skills out there. The key is exploring them, finding the ones that work for you, that are effective. And that may sometimes be alongside the help of a mental health professional and be able to identify those and to utilize those in your lives. and also for different situations, right? But there are a lot of different kinds out there. So I encourage you to explore what those look like. Reach out and give back. You know, our brains are wired for giving. In fact, there are chemicals that are released in our brain that are actually more rewarding than when we receive gifts or acts of kindness. Right? So again, we want to make sure that we're going about this in a healthy way, right? So it doesn't have to be grand gestures or donating tons of money if we're not able to, or making huge time commitments. But it could be small things, like we talked about earlier, sending a text or making a phone call, maybe writing a card and sending it through snail mail, right? Could be maybe cooking dinner for your family or the people in your household. We want to try to also vary our acts of kindness and beware of taking on too much. Otherwise, we may run the risk of feeling resentful for all of these things that we want to do for other people, right? You know, helping others shouldn't be harmful to us in any way. We want to do it because we want to give back, and that in turn makes us feel good. We're going to explore more in depth about practicing mindfulness and getting into our flow in a couple slides as well. But first, let's talk a little bit about social media, right? So how exactly can you use social media responsibly? Make a sandwich, right? Who doesn't love sandwiches? I absolutely love sandwiches. So let's apply that in theory to social media as well. Right? So the idea of making a social media sandwich is, if you have something difficult to share, we want to start off with something positive. We're going to share that challenging information, and then we're going to end it with something positive as well. So that's the sandwich that we're making. 2 pieces of bread, or whatever you use to wrap your sandwich, are the positive kind of feel-good posts, and then the difficult or challenging information that we might be sharing is going to be in the middle. Right? So for example, we may want to share something funny or lighthearted, then that challenging but useful and reputable information or website or news article, and then following up with something lighthearted or funny again. This way, when people are scrolling through their timelines or scrolling through their feeds, they're seeing more positive than they are negative, right? And especially in times like these, when there's so much negative on social media and different news outlets, we want to also supplement that with positive as well. Right? And it's even okay to take breaks sometimes, right? We talked about kind of monitoring how often we are checking the news. It's okay to take breaks from social media too, whether that's for a part of the day or even a whole day, a couple days, whatever that may be. All right, so staying present. Mental Health America of Hawaii, back in June, our theme for the month was mindfulness. So you'll be able to find this mindfulness bingo card that we see on the right hand of the screen on our website, as well as other videos and posts about mindfulness on our social media. But the whole focus of staying present and of mindfulness is choosing that present focus, right? The past has already happened. We can try our best to plan for the future, even though we may not know what that looks like. But what we really have the ability to change, or what we really have some control over, is the present. Right? So trying to stay present, focused, really helps to invest in ourselves and build that emotional strength so we can help use it in the future. Radical acceptance will be on the next slide, but utilizing meditation and prayer goes a long way with staying in the present. But that takes practice, right? To focus on only one thing at a time and to not multitask. I think we live in a society today where multitasking is like a sign of success. Like, you're productive today, you're doing so many things, sometimes at the same time. Look at you go. Okay? So that it even takes practice to just focus on one thing and focus on the present. So a suggestion I may have is to take advantage of some routine tasks that you may have. Like showering, for example. Have you ever noticed that when you're taking a shower, that's a time where you come up with your best arguments or rebuttals or daydreams or ideas or creative things pop into your mind? And that's because your body is on autopilot, right? You're not thinking about what you're doing. You're just, kind of going through the motions. And that in turn frees up your mind for other things to come into play. Right? And that might be a good opportunity to practice some meditation. And there's a lot of really great apps out there and websites and videos that'll help guide you through meditation exercises, even really short ones, depending on how much time you have. Right? It may seem like an easy thing to do, but being a good listener, okay, helps also to stay present, right? Because we want to stay present in that conversation. Right? And being a good listener is more than just sitting there and let someone talk at you, right? I, feel like I'm a good listener. I have so much patience. I can just sit there and let someone talk at me for a long time, right? But I don't mean just that, right? We want to stay present in our conversations, especially when they may be more difficult ones. So being fully present with an individual, right? Not being distracted by our phones or our devices or checking emails or thinking what I'm going to make for dinner later. But, listening to what the other person has to say, and not just listening with our ears, listening with our eyes. So being aware of body language, right? Listening with our whole bodies, right? So asking questions, validating responses, showing that you're hearing what the other person is saying and that you're really interested in hearing more, without, judging, right? Or spending too much time focusing on any biases that we may have, right? The point is staying present for that other person. Okay, so radical acceptance, right? Radical acceptance is ultimately accepting reality. Okay? So holding on to thoughts of unfairness or it shouldn't be this way, why is this happening? Right? It doesn't really help in accepting the reality of the situation. And it keeps us stuck in that place. Right? So it's important to note that acceptance is not agreement. Right? So accepting that something painful is happening or has happened and moving forward from that is not the same as saying it's okay that that painful thing happened to me, right? Rather, it's saying that I'm taking the energy from denying that it happened and putting it towards healing from it and moving forward from it, moving through it, right? And that takes practice, right? This is not something that can just be picked up, right, and done right away. And sometimes this radical acceptance takes the help of a mental health professional. So, even though with this presentation, we're kind of summarizing these models and these theories, and even summarizing radical acceptance on the slide, it takes that investment, it takes that energy to be put towards it. But it's extremely important in the process of healing and moving through challenging situations, much like the one that we are in now. All right, so let's talk about flow. Right? Some activities provide a little extra psychological boost. So these are activities that totally absorb us, right? They challenge us without overstressing us and make us feel fulfilled, right? And that's kind of what we call flow. So for example, maybe you are doing something that you love, whether it's a craft or a hobby, or something you just have fun doing, and you'll notice that a bunch of time has passed and you haven't even noticed. It felt kind of like a drop in the bucket, right? That's what flow is. And everyone's got their own sources of flow. For some, it may be catching a wave if you are into surfing. For someone else, it may be cooking or baking or bowling or working in the garden. Whatever your flow may be, it helps to make you feel effective and confident, creative, and in control in that moment. So to try to get more flow, we want to identify those times where we are really enjoying ourselves, the high points of our day, and try to do those activities a little more often. Try not to look for flow in passive pursuits. So unfortunately, watching TV or streaming our favorite show doesn't really spark that flow that's needed, right? But when you do find that task or that hobby or that activity, consider raising the difficulty level a little bit. Right, so recently I've gotten into jigsaw puzzles again. I've always liked jigsaw puzzles, but I'm able to raise the difficulty level so I can choose how many pieces that I want to work with for that day, right? And the really cool thing, I have it as an app on my tablet, and the cool thing about that is I don't have to clean it up afterwards or find a place to store it when I'm done. But that's just one example of finding your flow, right? And we want to make the space for that flow to happen, or for that self-care to happen even. If you've got an extra hour in your day or in your schedule and you find yourself kind of scrambling around looking to fill it with something just to be productive, try instead just letting it be, just letting that hour come and pass. even if it means you're just sitting there and relaxing. You know, you're allowing that space and that time for creativity and for self-care to happen. Okay, so let's talk about Keiki self-care. Right? So we always want to make sure that we're being developmentally appropriate. So for example, we're not going to be jumping into the science behind, you know, viruses and infectious diseases, but instead we're going to be talking about what happens when someone is feeling sick, right? What happens when you feel sick? We stay home and we rest, right? We don't go outside or be around other people because we don't want to get them sick either. And we want to try to empower our keiki as well. So what are those things that we do to make someone feel better when they're feeling sick? Right? Maybe let's make them a card and send it to them. Maybe let's draw a picture and hang it up in our window so anyone who might be walking by in the neighborhood can look at it and see it and enjoy it. Okay? So, you know, you may or may not know that adults sometimes are not the best at managing their schedules, but it is especially important for our children because they rely on us as adults to help manage those schedules and those routines, okay? And also to kind of understand the concept of time. If you have children or have worked with children before, maybe you've seen in TVs or movie shows, you know, someone's on a road trip, they're driving in a car and the kid in the backseat is like, are we there yet? Like, no, you know, it's an hour drive. We just started. We're like 15 minutes in, like, okay. And then 5 minutes later, like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Right? So that concept of time is even different. So it's just being aware of that for our keiki too. There's a ton of online resources. There's lots of fun activity ideas online that don't require a whole lot of resources or materials. And you can find some of those on our social media page. So we are on Facebook. We'll give you all of that information at the end. But you can also just Google different ideas too. Right? And we can also build emotional toolboxes for our children as well. Right? Practicing mindfulness goes towards building those emotional toolboxes. Right? So what does that kind of look like for our keiki? We can look at mindful eating, right? So there's an orange eating exercise by Thich Nhat Hanh, right? So you take an orange, right? One slice of orange in your hand, place it in your mouth and bite it once. Think about what it tastes like. What does it smell like? What does it feel like in your mouth as you're chewing it? Now imagine the seed that it started from, how it started to grow. Who took care of that tree when it grew into a tree? Right? So taking another slice, biting into it again. Imagine that tree continuing to grow, ready for harvest. Someone comes and picks those oranges, right? Puts it in a crate, and it makes its way to the store, taking another slice, taking a bite. Your parents or whomever go to the store and they buy that orange and they bring it home, and now you have it in your hands, right? So let's give thanks to all of the people and all of the processes and the bees and the energy that was put into making all of this possible, right? So mindful eating. We can also rely on counting breaths or synchronized breathing. So having your child take a deep breath in from their diaphragm area and counting for them, or having them do it alongside with you. Right? Kids enjoy that kind of synchronized breathing, you know, doing things alongside their adults, right? So taking in a breath and then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, maybe holding it for a second and letting it out, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? And then there's also checking in with bodily sensations, right? So maybe if we're outside in the yard, right? What is it that you're feeling right now? Is there a breeze? Right? What is the wind like? What is it that you're smelling? You know, is there some plants or flowers nearby, or is one of our neighbors cooking dinner and you can smell that in the air? What are you seeing, right? What's around you in your environment, right, that you take notice of, right? And then what and how does my body feel, right? What am I feeling in this moment, right? What does my body feel like? And what do I do to make myself feel better if I'm not feeling that great, right? So really just checking in with bodily sensations and checking in with the self. Of course, there is something to be said about being out in nature and spending time in nature. It may be a little harder for us to do now, but with keeping safety guidelines in mind, we can still get outside a little bit and enjoy nature. Bubble breaths help with taking deep breathing too, right? So bubble breaths help children learn an early form of that diaphragmatic breathing, so pulling from that diaphragm area. So getting some bubbles and having them take the biggest breath that they can and blow out the biggest bubble that they can. That's kind of getting them into the motion and into the practice of that deep breathing. And you can even use that, you know, when your child is feeling frustrated or a little anxious or high energy, like let's do some bubble breaths together, right? And of course, children's books on mindfulness, there's a ton out there, a lot of really great recommendations. The couple examples are up here on the screen that or some of Mental Health America Hawaii's favorite, but again, there are a ton of examples out there and I encourage you to explore those as well, because reading is always fun, right? Okay. So another thing we can put into our KK emotional toolboxes has to do specifically with grounding ourselves, right? And grounding our children, grounding themselves as well. So on the right-hand side are a couple coloring pages that were created by Mental Health America of Hawaii, can be found on our website. So fun way to color and practice a little bit of grounding, okay? But there's also kind of this little exercise as well, okay? The core of grounding is engaging your senses to bring more awareness to your body, right? So we kind of touched upon checking in with our bodily sensations, right? So typically adults usually know how to do this, but it's a little different with kids. So they may need a little more guidance, right? And there's creative ways to be able to do that as well. So let's go through what we have on the screen here. Okay. A tree has roots that flow deep into the earth. Some forests are so old that the tree roots weave together and hold them all in place. When you feel stressed or upset, you can be like a tree and remember to connect to the ground. You ground by taking in a deep breath through your nose and slowly letting it out through your mouth. Then you can say, I am as tall as a tree. My feet are like roots on the ground. My back is straight, like the trunk of a tree. My arms are like branches, right, that I can stretch to the sky. When I wiggle my fingers, they are like leaves in the wind. My head is a canopy of the tree. I can see all around me. I can be like a tree. Okay? So really short, really simple grounding exercise. Okay, to be able to kind of go along, have our children do it along with us, okay, and practice that kind of grounding. So another really great exercise to add to our emotional toolboxes here. Okay, so as we move through development, adolescent thinking and emotional intelligence becomes a little more sophisticated and a little more complex as well, right? So we want to adjust our strategies a little bit. Okay, so with the access to the internet and with social media, we definitely want to make sure that that the information that we are giving to our adolescents and to our youth is accurate, right? That we are sharing reputable sites and reputable information. But we also want to do things to help empower them, to help others, right? And to help and to do meaningful things, because that always makes us feel better as human beings, right? When we get to put our energy towards helping others and making a difference. Schedules, of course, we want to help our adolescents manage their routines as well. So, you know, sticking to our sleep schedules is super important. You know, it's really tempting to stay up all night playing video games or talking to our friends on social media into the wee hours of the morning. But we want to do our best to manage our schedules, right? Because the more that we do that, the easier the transition will be. And now, especially now that they're talking about, you know, what is transitioning into school going to be looking like for our kids and our youth. We will talk about a few online resources in just a minute, but just know, again, even for our adolescents and youth, there are a lot out there too, okay? We will also want to make sure that our youth are using social media responsibly, so we can even tell them about making a social media sandwich, right? Sharing something positive, then that difficult thing, and something positive again as well, right? We always want to remind youth that even when we're online, even when we're not physically in the same space with another person, we should always remain respectful, right, and compassionate, and we should conduct ourselves in that way as well, even when there may be differences in opinion, right? So I'm sure we've all seen on social media those kind of arguments or debates that come up, and it's just comment after comment after comment after comment, right? It may not be the best time to kind of jump in and put your opinion out there, right? We want to maybe encourage youth and even some adults too to ask themselves, is what I'm posting or what I'm sharing or what I'm contributing helping the situation? If it's not, maybe that's not the best thing to post or to share or to add to. Okay? Everyone responds differently to stress and to anxiety, feelings of sadness, whatever the mixture of emotions we may be feeling. And additionally, these feelings can be expressed in a lot of different ways, right? So we don't usually recognize irritability and anger as being associated with having a depressed mood, but they actually are, right? They are symptoms of that, and they can be ways that those feelings are expressed, right? So the key is checking in, right? And using I statements when doing that. And I can see that you're frustrated. I see that this is really hard for you, right? I've noticed that this has been happening. Do you want to talk? Right? How can I be there for you? Right? Tell me what's been going on. All of those kinds of statements help to open the door for that conversation to happen, right? We want to create that safe environment to be able to have that space to express thoughts and to express feelings and emotions, because that's not always the easiest thing to do for a lot of people. Okay? If they feel like they may be unsafe, either with their thoughts or the behaviors, you can ask them the question. What do I mean by the question is by asking, are you thinking about suicide? Or have you had thoughts about killing yourself? This is absolutely okay to do, and it's encouraged to do if it's someone that you are truly concerned for. Some of us may have heard that we don't want to ask this kind of question, or we don't want to talk about suicide because we don't want to put ideas in people's heads, or we don't want to plant any seeds. And this is not true. There's so much research that shows that by asking direct questions and by talking about suicide in a safe way, we are not putting any ideas in people's heads. Right? We are actually sending the message that it's okay to talk about this really difficult thing with me. Right? You didn't have to say it. I put it out there on the table. I opened that door. Right? And I'm coming from a place of caring. Right? So the key is to be direct, be clear, and just know I'm asking because I care about you and because I'm worried about you. Right? If you feel uncomfortable or unprepared in asking this question, that's okay too. Right? There are a lot of other resources and people out there who are available to help. And again, we'll give you those resources at the end of this presentation. Okay. So like with our children, there are a lot of really great online resources out there for our adolescents and youth as well. And by building emotional boxes for our teenagers, they are then able to carry that on through adulthood. Right? So like we encourage youth to think about finances and investing at an early age, right? We want to also be having those same types of conversations when it comes to taking care of their mental health, right? By investing in self-care and identifying those supports, those supportive people, those supportive activities, or even supportive places that they go to when they feel stressed out that help make them feel better. By identifying those early, they're able to carry them through adulthood. Okay, so on our website, mentalhealthhawaii.org, we have a couple online resources. So when you go to our website, at the very top, right away, you'll see this big banner. It says New Get Connected. By clicking on that banner, you'll be able to go to our Get Connected page, which has a lot of topics specifically to do with COVID-related online resources. It's got a link to our trainings page, so any future opportunities that maybe have can be found on there with registration links. It includes downloadable graphics, so like those coloring pages or that mindfulness bingo that we saw earlier. So a lot of great information and resources on there, even through our own website. We're on social media, again, like I was saying. So one of our groups on Facebook is Busy Bees. So here we can find all kinds of different activities, fun videos, and even easy craft ideas for our keiki. We also have a book club. So for those of you who enjoy reading, we also do monthly book recommendations, some book reviews. We share different quotes. So if you're looking for other book recommendations, I encourage you to join that book or that group, or even if you have recommendations for yourself. On our main Mental Health America of Hawaii Facebook page, we do cool things too, like movie, television recommendations through the decades, right? So things that lighthearted things that can be fun and enjoyed by the whole family, okay? And one of the cool things that we've seen come up from these recommendations is all of the comments that are put on there as well, people having additional ideas, right? Or additional movies or TV shows that they really enjoyed in that decade. Right, so here are some different crisis resources that we've been referring to throughout today. We have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. We also have the Crisis Line of Hawaii is now known as Hawaii Cares, but it's the same exact number. They both are 24/7. The process is the same. The only difference between Hawaii Cares and the Crisis Line of Hawaii is that there are now additional services that are being offered. So it's still absolutely a crisis line if needed, but it's also kind of a point where you can get more information about behavioral health services, right? What are those next steps? Both of these lines, again, 24/7, anyone can call these numbers, friend, parent, teacher, neighbor, classmate, member of the community, right? So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, or you yourself might need help and you can't really reach out to anyone right away, call these hotlines. You know, that's what they're there for. These operators are trained to help talk you through it. We know that there is more time being spent at home, right? And we also know that home is not always the safest place for everyone. So if you or someone in your life needs to have more safety because of intimate partner violence, just know that these hotlines are also available to call from the National Domestic Violence Hotline or the Domestic Violence Action Center here in Hawaii. With our children and our teens being out of school, there are in turn less eyes on them, right? And being able to watch and maybe notice things that are wrong. So it's always, you know, a concern or a priority to make sure that they are safe as well. So the hotlines on the right-hand side are available to report any concerns that you may have. And then, of course, the same goes for our kupuna and our youth who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or any other identity out there as well. All of these hotlines are still available to call, even with everything that's happening. We also have a Mental Health of Hawaii on our Facebook Maui group, right? So Miss Danielle Bergen is our Maui community coordinator, absolutely beautiful person inside and out. She is the one-woman show of our office on Maui. So any kind of Maui information that you're looking, or Maui specific information or resources that you're looking for, join the Maui Facebook group or give her a call at 808-242-6461. And then here's the information for our Oahu office. So there's our website right there. Our office number is 521-1846. Usually someone is available to take a call Monday through Friday from about 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We are more than happy to point people in the right direction, okay? Connect them to different information or resources that they may need or they may be looking for. Okay, so that's really the bulk of what I have for you today. I'll start by thanking you so much again for joining us virtually. I know we're kind of all adjusting and attending all these webinars, and Zoom fatigue is a real thing, I promise you, okay? So I really appreciate everyone who showed up today to learn a little bit more about self-care and why it's important and how can we do that? How can we make that happen? So I'm hoping you were able to learn maybe some new things today that you're in turn able to share with other people. And I think at this point, I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions that people may have. You can use that Q&A feature. You can use the chat box. If you have any comments, those are always welcome as well. If you are a person like me and you take time to digest and to process information that you've learned and you find yourself maybe later on today or later on the week, having a question, feel free to reach out and contact us. We are more than happy to make ourselves available even for that. Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. There's not usually too many questions that pop up with these kind of self-care presentations, and that's okay. Just be on the lookout sometime this week for that follow-up email. We're going to make this recording available. I'll share these slides with you, and I'll share some additional resources as well. But other than that, thank you so much, Dr. Misty Sagas, for dropping our email in there too, info@mentalhealthhawaii.org. Get that self-care in, okay? Make sure you prioritize it. Make it a part of your routine, right? And enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Okay? And take care, everyone. Thank you so much.